Good afternoon, class. I hope everyone is awake and refreshed and ready because we have quite a few things to do today. Now, at this point, you should have at least a general idea of what your essay is going to be about, and maybe narrow down a couple of sources. But just in case, I want to talk to you about how to find published sources and how to evaluate them. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so if you are looking for published sources, there are quite a few ways to do that. The first way, of course, is to check your local library, and you can search for periodicals, which are journals or magazines, books, and books and other resources using the library catalog. Now, most libraries nowadays have an online catalog where you can easily search for whatever it is you're looking for and identify, where to find it, or at least see if it is available or if it needs to be put on hold or something. If not, you can always go to your local library, go to their reference desk or their information desk, and they can easily help you out. If you do not already have a library card at your local library, I definitely recommend going and doing that. It's your public library is usually free wherever you are paying taxes. You just need to present your driver's license or some form of ID to show that you are living at that address. And if you are looking for sources on the internet, a really good place to start is with Google Scholar. So you have a link right here to access it, and that will be really helpful. So I definitely recommend checking that out. And then there are different databases you can use online, such as Learn. You have a link to that as well, and you should have access to Learn through MedLife Institute already. If you have any issues with that, please let Dr. Rainford know. And other than that, of course, you can always do a basic Google search. But when you are using Google, just like that, make sure you are searching based on relevant keywords. So, for example, if we're writing a paper on the morality of euthanasia, you can search for mercy killing cases in the USA, or euthanasia pros and cons, or legal consequences of euthanasia, what happens when euthanasia fails, or physician-assisted suicide rates in the United States. And generally, the more specific you can be, the better sources you will be able to find. Okay. Okay, so when we are using keywords and Boolean expressions, okay, so let's talk about that first. So Boolean expressions use and, or, and not, or their corresponding symbols combined with keywords to help refine your search. Boolean expressions were created based on an algebraic system of logic formulated by the 19th century English mathematician George Boole. So they're a really great way to help you find, to really help broaden your search or narrow it based on what you need to find. So Boolean operators are the and, or, and not. So if we use and, or the plus signal, this plus symbol, it will narrow the focus of your search by essentially telling the search engine to find both of those keywords or key phrases that you typed in. Using not or the minus symbol will narrow the focus of your search by eliminating those words or phrases from your search. So, for example, we can search for euthanasia cases in the United States, not in the South, or something like that. You can also, of course, use or to broaden the focus of your search by telling the search engine to find information with either keyword or key phrase used. And then you can also further refine your search by adding quotation marks when you want to find an exact phrase. So, say for example, the exact phrase we're looking for is physician-assisted suicide in Florida. So we put that in quotation marks, or so on. And you can find more information on Boolean operators and more at this link right here. I definitely recommend checking that out for more information. It will be really helpful. So real quick, here are some examples to further illustrate that idea. So say for example we are using and. So if we are using and, for this example, if we say vegan and vegetarian, it would pull whatever is common. So it can pull up, if you're searching vegan and vegetarian in Google, it could pull up like social media groups that are for both vegans and vegetarians. It could pull up restaurants that are both vegan and vegetarian friendly, and so on, things like that. So it will talk about anything that basically applies both to vegans and to vegetarians. Okay? And if we use or, so if we use or for this, it will pull up anything that is relevant to either one of these. So it can pull up sources that are strictly for vegans. It can pull up stuff that is strictly for vegetarians. It can pull up results that are relevant to both. It's basically this. If you're using or, it will be an either or and situation. Essentially, your results will be either relevant to either one of the two, or to both in some way. Okay. And then, of course, there is not. So if we are searching for vegan, not vegetarian, it will show you results that are relevant only to vegans, not to vegetarians. And of course, that distinction right there is important if we are talking about things that are different. Like, say, for example, vegan and vegetarian, it is similar but a little bit different. Like, vegetarians still eat eggs and milk and cheeses and things like that. Vegans will not do that. So say a vegan person is searching for restaurants that are vegan, not vegetarian, that is helpful for them because they quickly need to identify places that they can eat where most of the dishes or all of the dishes will be vegan, not vegetarian. Because a vegetarian person can eat vegan food, but a vegan will not eat vegetarian food unless it is vegan. Okay? Now, more resources on that would be really helpful are Google Advanced Search. So this is a really great resource. It'll help you really narrow down your search based on specific criteria. And if you are looking for government statistics to really back up whatever your thesis is or whatever your claim is, then check out www.data.gov. And then you can search based on topics. You can search for, health issues or other things like that, and you'll be able to easily find statistics. And statistics, of course, are a great way to back up your claim. Okay, so when you are evaluating sources, let's talk about that. So let's say you found something. You found a blog or a journal article or a book, and you think it's a great place to start. But what do you do next? So let's talk about that. So there are a few key things to ask yourself. One is, how did you find the source? Did you find it via a Google search, your library, Google Scholar, etc.? The next thing you have to ask yourself, is the publisher authoritative or reputable? So let's say, for example, the publisher is just a guy who no one knows by name. Like, he has no significant reputation. He probably just sits in his basement and blogs about whatever. Like, is he really going to be, authoritative or reputable? No. So a source that is reputable or authoritative, of course, would be, if the government is publishing specific statistics or an expert in the field, or some kind of like healthcare authority, and so on. Like, for example, Mayo Clinic would be considered authoritative, and things like that. Or the World Health Organization. Okay. And then, of course, the next thing you have to ask is the author qualified to write about the topic? Have they studied the topic extensively? Have they written about it extensively? What did they study? What have they been doing? What are they involved in? Do they know what they're talking about, essentially? So say, for example, we are talking about let's say your topic is about, it could be anything. It could be about, okay, well, it could be about like cosmetics or something. So the author has to be, somehow affiliated with the industry and have a reputation within that industry. So it could be a chemist who works mostly with mixing cosmetics and things like that. It could be the founder of a makeup brand or something like that. But they have to know what they're talking about. Okay. And next, does the source offer sufficient and credible evidence? That, of course, is super important. If you are using a source to back up your own argument, in addition to you being credible, you have to make sure that your source is credible and they are offering enough evidence to back up what they are saying, because you will be using that same evidence to back yourself up. Okay, so basically think about it in the sense that you are as strong as your argument is as strong as your source. If your source is weak, your argument is going to be weak. And reliable sources are, of course, fair and balanced in tone. Remember, you don't want to use a source that is obviously biased in any way. It is, of course, possible for someone to be pro one particular stance or favor one particular side of the argument without being unfair to the other side. Like, say for generally, the best way to tell is they will, examine both sides of the argument, but still find a way to state that one side is stronger than the other. But they're not going to be doing it in a way that undermines the other side or that is disrespectful or anything like that. So, of course, it has to be balanced in tone and balanced in treatment, which means basically examining both sides of the debate, not ignoring one over the other. They have to be logical. Okay, like say for example, if we are writing a paper on the importance of vaccines, and of course the opposing sides on that are being pro-vaccines and being anti-vaccines. So generally, one of the reasons why the anti-vaccination movement is so controversial in nature is precisely because the arguments that people who are anti-vaccinations use are not logical in nature. And the problem with that is that if you are trying to convince someone of something, you really need to be credible, and the best way to do that is with logical appeals. Remember logos. You need to appeal to logic. And that is really the best way to do that. Because generally, if you were trying to convince someone of something so serious, you need to be logical about it. If you are trying to appeal to their emotions and using pathos, you're less likely to convince them and to make a strong argument. And of course, reliable sources generally are well edited. They are free or mostly free of most grammatical errors and contain correct spelling and syntax. So if you are reading an article and every other word is misspelled, or there are obvious grammar errors, or the writing itself is choppy, it jumps from one ID to the next without any clear transition, then that's a pretty good sign that most likely it wasn't edited, or it wasn't edited very well, at least. In which case you can consider the fact that it's probably not very reliable or very reputable, because most authoritative sources, most reputable sources will make sure that their papers and their content is well edited. So generally, an easy way to tell if your source is questionable is if it is clearly biased in tone. Does it rely on stereotypes, sarcasm? Is it just overly negative toward the other side? And if it is obviously one-sided. Now remember, in an argumentative essay, of course you are going to be favoring one side more than the other, but you will still need to do it in a balanced way and in a balanced tone. But if your source is one-sided, they're probably generally the issue is that they can even sometimes ridicule the opposite opinion, or disrespect it in some way, undermine it, and attempt to take away its validity, which you're not looking for. In an academic essay, we are considering that both sides of an opinion or both sides of an argument are both valid. We just believe in one more strongly than the other, and you are trying to convince the reader of that one side has more is stronger than the other. And another easy way to tell that a source is questionable is if it uses flawed logic. Basically, does it make sense? Does what they're saying make sense? So, and of course, we see examples of this all the time when people make decisions based on flawed logic, and to us, it makes no sense. So that should be one that is pretty easy to pinpoint, and if it just doesn't seem to make sense, if it's not logical, if it's not reasonable, then that's a source you're definitely better off not using. And of course, if it is poorly edited, if it is full of grammar errors, if it has spelling mistakes, really obvious spelling mistakes, and it's just full of them. Like 1 or 2 grammatical errors are more than possible within a published piece of content, and spelling mistakes as well. It happens. Like I have read plenty of novels in the past where I will come across a pretty obvious typo or pretty obvious spelling error, and I'll be like, oh my god, how did the editor not notice that? But of course, that is keeping in mind that even though the publisher is authoritative and the editor is well known, sometimes you just look at, no matter how many times you look at a piece of writing, your brain will skip over that one little error. So that does happen. 1 or 2 errors is fine, not a big deal, but if every other word is spelled incorrectly, if there are obvious grammar errors in every single sentence, then that's definitely a red flag. Okay, so here, I want to refresh your memory real quick on correct subject-verb agreements, because one of the most common mistakes that writers do make does concern subject-verb agreement. Now, you guys have been practicing that through your quizzes and through your grammar assessments, but I want to just make sure that we are familiar with correct subject-verb agreement, so watch the video below. Okay, it's just very brief. It should give you a good idea of what to look for. Okay, and here are some other helpful videos. Okay, so again, for the most part, you guys did a good job with your second assignments as well. But there are still some things I want to work on. So when to use commas with and, or, and other words like that. So check that out, because comma usage is something that some of us are still struggling with, which is fun, that's understandable, but definitely check out that video, and let's hope it helps. Using that versus which. This is something that comes up quite often, not just for you guys, but in general. That is something that a lot of people struggle with in terms of their writing. So go ahead and watch that video. And then once you're done with that, I want you to watch this video on the prepositions on, at, in, and by, because that is something that does come up quite a lot, especially if English is not your first language. Then that is something that comes up quite often, and it is something that most people find very confusing. Okay, so take a look at that. Okay, so next, I want you guys to start working on your Connect assignments. So we have a Chapter 13 study module. Make sure you complete that. It is worth 100 points, so make sure it submits properly. And then an APA practice that does have some short answers and some multiple choice, so make sure you complete that as well. Then when you are done with both of those, I want you to do the mandatory reading 2. Now, of course, the mandatory reading, it does not have any questions based on it or anything like that. It is just to make sure that you read. And of course, it is mandatory, so make sure you do read it. Just because, again, I want you guys to get into the habit of reading. And when you are finished, work on your outline. So, and what I mean by work on your outline is, if you have already completed your outline, great. Go over it again. Look it over again. Make sure that your thesis is strong, that your topic sentences are strong, that your sources are authoritative and clear and not biased, and just polish up your writing within your outline as much as you can. And then refer back to the PowerPoint from our second class for more details on the parts of an essay and structure, because that will help you quite a lot as well with structuring your essay in terms of the introduction, your body paragraphs, and your conclusion. And next, keep these due dates in mind. So for due dates, remember you're submitting your outline for approval and a grade by June 20th. And then you're submitting the first draft for in-class peer review on the 27th. Okay? So the reason why I gave you guys 2 weeks to work on the outline and then 1 week for the first draft is because you have those 2 weeks to gather your information on your sources and figure out your thesis statements and your topic sentences and your body paragraphs. So once you are done with that, it's just a matter of putting everything together and polishing it up a little bit for your first draft. So have the first draft ready for in-class peer review on June 27th. Once you're done with peer review, proofread, put it through Grammarly, and make sure you complete your revisions. Okay, and then once you are done with that, submit the final draft of your essay in Connect by July 4th. Of course, July 4th is Independence Day, so don't worry about, don't take it as, oh, I'm not going to be in class, so I don't have to submit this on time. No, it's going to be submitted online, so just make sure you do submit it by then. Okay? So, and of course, if it is late, then I will have to take off 10 points, which I don't want to do. So make sure you do submit it on time. Okay? So any questions, comments, and concerns, you can email me, but do keep in mind that I will be traveling internationally and there is a significant time difference. So I may not be able to respond to you right away. If it is an issue with an assignment, something that is not too complicated, but it's just, how it reads or something like that, then go ahead and ask a classmate. If you still have concerns or questions or doubts, go ahead and email me. Now, a quick review on the guidelines for your short essay. Remember that I'm looking for a double-spaced paper, 1.5 to 2 pages, in a neutral font, such as Times New Roman, size 12, and of course with APA in-text citations and a references page. And of course you will need to have a strong title, your name, the course number, which is GOC 101, and the date at the top. Okay? And make sure everything is formatted correctly, because I will take points off for improper formatting and weak titles and not submitting the paper on time. Because at this point, you guys should have a pretty decent grasp of how to format your papers, because we've gone over that with your previous assignments. And for double spacing your paper, remember I went over that in the last class. Double spacing just means the space between the actual lines. So you should remember how to do that. If you don't remember, just go ahead and ask a classmate. If for some reason that's still an issue, you guys still don't remember, you go ahead and send me an email. I'll take a look. Okay? So good luck with your writing, and do your best. Let me know if you have any concerns, and good luck with your writing, and I'll see you next class. Okay? Bye.